A Scandal in Bohemia by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Retold in simplified English by A.L. Stringer. Copyright A.L. Stringer, 2011. For Sherlock Holmes, there is only one woman, and she is superior to all others. However, you should not think that he's in love with her. He dislikes emotions, especially that one. Holmes is a thinking machine. Falling in love would stop his carefully balanced mind from working properly. Still, he has great respect for this woman, and her name is Irene Adler. At the time this story took place, I hadn't seen Holmes for some time. I'd got married the previous summer and moved out of our shared flat in Baker Street. I'd returned to my old job as a doctor, and I'd been spending all my free time with my wife, setting up our new home. Holmes had remained at Baker Street. He hated socializing and spent his time alone in the flat, surrounded by his old books. From time to time I'd heard news about him, and knew he'd been busy investigating crimes that were too difficult for the police to solve. And then one night, it was the 20th of March, 1888, I was coming home after visiting a patient. My journey took me along Baker Street. As I passed Holmes's door, I had a sudden wish to see him again and find out what he was doing. I looked up and saw a light shining brightly in his window. At that moment I saw his tall, slim figure pass behind the curtains. He was walking quickly round the room with his head bent down and his hands behind his back. I knew Holmes very well and immediately understood what this meant. He was concentrating hard on some new problem. I rang the bell and was shown up to the flat where I'd once lived. Holmes didn't say much, but I think he was glad to see me. He offered me a cigar and stood in front of the fire, looking at me carefully. "A marriage suits you, Watson," he said. "You've put on 3.5 kilograms since I last saw you." "Only 3," I replied. "Really? I would say a little more. And I see you're working as a doctor again. You didn't tell me you were planning to go back to work." "So how do you know?" "I can see it. I can deduce it. I can also see that you've recently got very wet and muddy, and your maid is extremely careless." "Really, Holmes," I said, "how can you possibly know that? It's true I went for a walk in the country on Thursday and came home very dirty. But I've changed my clothes since then. As for our maid, Mary Jane, you're right. She's very lazy, and my wife has given her notice. But I can't understand how you can know that." He laughed to himself and rubbed his long hands together. "Simple," he said. "On the inside of your left shoe there are some marks. Obviously, they were made by someone removing mud with a knife, but they did it so carelessly they cut the leather. Now that explains my deduction that you've been out in bad weather, and that your servant is so careless she damages your shoes. And then there's my first deduction that you're working as a doctor again. You walked into my room smelling of the chemicals that are used in hospitals. I could also see the end of your stethoscope sticking out from under your hat. Now surely any reasonably intelligent person could guess he was looking at a medical man." I laughed. "You make it sound so simple," I said. "So why can't I make deductions like these? My eyes are as good as yours." "That's true," he answered. He lit a cigarette and threw himself into a chair. "But when you see something, Watson, you do not observe it. There's a difference. For example, how many times have you seen the steps which lead up to this room?" "Oh, hundreds of times." "Then how many are there?" "How many? I don't know." "Exactly. You've seen them, but you haven't observed them. Now, I know there are 17 steps, because I've both seen and observed." He paused and picked up a sheet of thick notepaper that was lying on his desk. "Anyway, as you're so interested in the science of deduction, you may like to look at this." He passed me the paper. "It arrived in the post today. Read it aloud." The note was neither signed nor dated, and there was no address. It read, "A gentleman will visit you at 8 o'clock this evening. He wishes to discuss a very important matter with you. We have good reports of you received. Your recent services to one of the royal families of Europe show that you can be trusted with confidential business. Be in your room at 8, and do not be worried if your visitor wears a mask." "How mysterious," I said. "What do you think it means?" "At the moment I have no other information, and it's a major mistake to make theories before you have enough information. It's too easy to make the facts fit your theory instead of making your theory fit the facts. But what about this note? What can you deduce from it?" I looked carefully at the handwriting and the paper it was written on. "Well, the man who wrote it was clearly wealthy," I said, trying to copy Holmes's methods. "This paper is quite unusual. Very high quality. You can't buy that kind of paper cheaply." "Unusual is exactly the right word," said Holmes. "It's not English paper at all. Hold it up to the light." I did as he said, and saw a watermark. There was a large E with a small g, a P, and a large G with a small t. "What do you make of that?" asked Holmes. "Name of a hotel?" "Not at all. The G with the small t stands for Gesellschaft. It's the German word for company, like co in English. P, of course, stands for Papier. As for the EG, let's look in a European directory." He took down a heavy brown book from his shelves. "Egloff, Eglonitz, here we are, Egria. It's a German-speaking region of Bohemia, not far from Carlsbad. It's well known for its glass factories and paper mills. Now, what do you make of that?" His eyes were shining, and he sent up a great cloud of blue smoke from his cigarette. "The paper was made in Bohemia," I said. "Precisely. And the man who wrote the note is a German. Look at this sentence. 'We have good reports of you received.' Only a German would put the verb at the end of the sentence like that." "We must wait and see what he wants, this German, who uses Bohemian writing paper and likes to wear a mask. But listen, I can hear horses outside." He looked out of the window. "Two of them. Beautiful animals. Worth a lot. And a nice little carriage, too. There's money in this case, Watson, if nothing else." At that moment the doorbell rang. "I think I'd better go, Holmes." "Certainly not, Doctor. Stay where you are. This could be an interesting case. It would be a pity to miss it. But your visitor, never mind him. I may want your help, and so may he. Here he comes. Sit down in that chair, Doctor, and pay careful attention to what he says." I heard slow, heavy footsteps on the stairs, and then a loud knock on the door. "Come in," said Holmes.